Thank you for tuning in to podcast number 54 of Sports Talk with JWock. I am your host, Jonah Walkenfoos, and today I will be discussing whether or not I think George and Sean Payton did enough to be able to help this Broncos team make the playoffs next year and potentially contend. So if you want to hear more about that, make sure to stay tuned. Once again, thank you for tuning into podcast number 54 of Sports Talk with JWock. And before I go into talking about the Denver Broncos, I just want to say I apologize for not doing the topic I said I was going to do, where I'm going to be basically naming one player each team in the NBA could use going into this next season. I'm actually going to push that back until the end of the NBA Finals, just so we can kind of see just how each team is and where they're standing right now, especially since the playoffs are still going. I feel like it's kind of hard to do that topic. And then next week, if you want to stay tuned for that, check in. We're going to be doing a NBA Mock Draft 2.0. That's going to be post-draft lottery, so we're going to know the exact order. And we might include trades. I'm not 100% sure about that yet, but make sure to stay tuned for that. But anyways, let's talk about the Denver Broncos. I think it's about time to talk about football again. The NFL draft was just a couple of weeks ago, and it's really exciting just to be able to see, maybe the new players each of your favorite teams, acquired via draft or free agency or whatever. And I'm going to talk about my favorite team, the Denver Broncos. I'm going to be doing more NFL content later on. I just thought, it'd be nice to just have an NFL episode in general. But unfortunately, for some of you, I'm not talking about your favorite team. I'm talking about my favorite team. But I will be talking about more teams in the future. But let's talk about the Denver Broncos. First up, I'm going to put a little graphic up of all the signings, re-signings, and players drafted. So I'm just going to name them real quick. Some key re-signings for the Broncos are Jarrett Stidham, their backup quarterback, and then DJ Jones, a key defensive tackle in their rotation. Some key additions in free agency, they added Talanoa Hufanga, a safety who was previously on the San Francisco 49ers, as well as his former teammate Dre Greenlaw, or not former, still current teammate Dre Greenlaw, a middle linebacker or inside linebacker, whatever you want to say, from the 49ers as well. They also added Evan Ingram, a tight end from the Jaguars. And then the key players they drafted was Jahdae Barron, the cornerback from Texas, RJ Harvey, a running back from UCF, Pat Bryant, the wide receiver from Illinois, and then Savion Jones, the defensive end from LSU. So I also think you could say Quay Robinson from Alabama. I think he's a good edge rusher. But overall, I think the Broncos had some really smart and strategic moves. The moves I really like are the free agency moves. Specifically in Dre Greenlaw, I think inside linebacker has been an issue for the Broncos for years to come, or for many years. I apologize for saying, never mind. Many years they've had that issue. And then tight end, I really like Evan Ingram, a really good receiving threat at tight end, another option for Bo Nix. Evan Ingram in the past, in one season, has had more receiving yards than Adam Troutman's stint on the Broncos for 2 years. So it's pretty insane. Evan Ingram's definitely a massive increase in the tight end room. And then I also like adding Jahdae Barron. I think that was a very debated draft pick. A lot of people were expecting an Omarion Hampton or even a Matthew Golden. But they drafted Jahdae Barron. I was a little upset at the moment, but honestly, I really like it now that I think about it. You're adding more depth at cornerback, which is always needed, in my opinion, on any team. And he's just a cornerback that's going to be able to be an instant impact and an instant playmaker for the team. I also really like RJ Harvey from UCF. He's a little bit older of a running back coming out of college, but that's fine. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of those players from now on, especially since NIL deals are still a thing. It's definitely making college players consider playing longer in college. And RJ Harvey is a really good, elusive, quick running back with really good vision. He's got great contact balance, and he's just a really good receiving threat, which I think is going to be very crucial in this offense, especially with Sean Payton calling the plays. So I do have some notes here. I'm going to talk about the offense and the defense, and I'm going to kind of give my prediction, and then we'll wrap up this episode. So offensively, let's start. The Broncos definitely for the last 10 years, it feels like, have not been known for their offense. It's been defense the whole way. It feels like the Broncos defense in general in the franchise has been very well known as just like the main contributing factor of why the Broncos are always really good. Now, that doesn't speak for the last couple of years, obviously. But it's always been the biggest question these last 10 years has felt like, who's going to be that offensive weapon that's going to help this offense be able to score so the defense, first off, isn't on the field all game, and second off, to where they can score and start winning some games, because the defense keeps them in the game. It's the offense that kind of is lacking, right? So offensively, I think the Broncos made a stride forward last season, but I think this season is going to be interesting. Bo Nix is playing his second year under Sean Payton's offense. This is also a full offseason for Bo Nix to improve upon last season. It felt, last offseason, Bo Nix was worried about the draft combine, meetings with other teams, figuring out where he's going to get drafted. And then he had the rookie mini camp where he had to learn a lot. And then it's like training camp or mini camps and stuff like that. So Bo Nix, he doesn't have to worry about a ton of that anymore. He does still have to do training camp and all that, but now he has time to be able to learn more, be able to work with his weapons that he already knows, and some new ones like Evan Ingram and RJ Harvey and Pat Bryant. But this is going to be a great opportunity for Bo Nix to really lock in, focus on the season, be able to improve. He has NFL film to be able to improve on and be able to work on this offseason, work with coaches, work with players. So I'm really excited to see how Bo Nix is going to be able to improve for year two. Hopefully he doesn't have a year two slump, which a lot of people, some people do. Some quarterbacks specifically do, or it's called the sophomore slump, I guess. But anyways, I also think, let's talk about some of Bo Nix's weapons, right? Marvin Mims, one of my favorite players on the Denver Broncos. He's going into year 3. He had a really good breakout season last year, but I think he's going to do even better because I think Sean Payton has figured out what Marvin Mims does best in and how he does best by basically giving him the ball and letting him do the rest, letting him be a playmaker. He's a really good kick returner and punt returner. So Sean Payton kind of uses that ability on the offense where you give him the ball, you get a couple people ahead of him to set some, good, blocks, and then he's able to make some plays. He's able to be a good playmaker like he does when he's getting a punt return or a kick return. And one of the big things is Marvin Mims had a pretty solid season statistically. I don't have any of the stats up, so bear with me on this. But it felt like he was starting to actually get used finally in week 11 of the NFL season. Maybe a couple weeks earlier when Sean Payton was kind of having him running back at a couple of plays. But at week 11, when they played the Atlanta Falcons, it felt like they finally figured out how to use Marvin Mims properly, and it didn't go back after that. Sean Payton was consistently using him the rest of the season, and he was a star the rest of the season, in my opinion, and he looked really good. I also think this is a big year for the last year's rookies' offensive weapons, like Devon Vele and Troy Franklin, the 2 wide receivers that got drafted. Devon Vele's a bit older. I think he's going to have just a solid season. I think he's going to be pretty similar, maybe a little better because he was injured a lot of the beginning of the season. Troy Franklin, to be quite honest with you, was kind of hard to put on the field. The end of the season, yeah, he had that electric play where Bo Nix threw him that touchdown in Buffalo, that deep ball that they finally connected on. I think Troy Franklin's going to be able to improve a lot. I think he just didn't look focused on the field. I think this offseason he's going to be able to really lock in and focus. But a lot of people are saying he might get cut, but who knows? We'll just see. And then Audric Estime. This is a big opportunity for him. The Broncos didn't really sign any big name free agents as of now. But Estime is going to have an increased role regardless, I think. And I think the Broncos do have a lot of trust in him, especially since they didn't draft in the first round or they didn't trade up to get an Ashton Genty or something like that. So in my opinion, if I'm Estime, I got to take full advantage of this opportunity, and I think this could be a really good year for Audric Estime to really prove that he is a lot better of a running back than a lot of Broncos fans specifically think. And then finally, for the offense, they added a new key weapon in the offense in Evan Ingram. I think this is going to open up the playbook a lot. It's going to open up different routes for a lot of different players. It's just going to be so interesting to see how Evan Ingram is used in Sean Payton's offense and how Bo Nix and him can connect. So that's the offense. I do think there's a lot of things to be excited about this Broncos offense. And let's talk about the defense now just for a little bit, where this defense was basically a top 3 defense last season. They were unbelievable. They have the former reigning defensive player of the year in Patrick Surtain. Nick Bonito also had a double-digit sack year. I believe Jonathan Cooper did as well. The Broncos broke their own previous franchise record in sacks in a season. They also had 5 players, I think, that had 5+ sacks, so that was a really good season. But one of the biggest keys they did this offseason was they added much-needed holes in the inside linebacker and safety position, especially with the safety. I thought PJ Locke was okay, but I also thought there were moments where he made a lot of big mistakes that led to, potentially game-swinging moments. And adding Talanoa Hufanga to replace him and go alongside Brandon Jones is going to be very crucial, and I'm very excited to see how that works. And then along with inside linebacker, Alex Singleton is coming back from, I believe it's an ACL tear that he did that occurred in, I believe it was week 3 against Tampa Bay. I'm not very high on Alex Singleton. I think it would still be nice to replace him. I know Drew Sanders is a young player, but maybe you have him play, after 4 or 5 weeks if Singleton's not working out, especially if he can't be as mobile. Because tearing your ACL, you're not going to be able to come back fully recovered a lot of the times. And then you added Dre Greenlaw into that room, which I really like. There was reports just a week ago about him injuring, I believe it was his quad. But they said he should be good to go for training camp, so that's not a worry. So I'm excited to see what Dre Greenlaw's going to bring. I know his teammate Hufanga, who's also coming to Denver, has really high things to say about him, has a high motor, so I'm really excited to see how that pans out for Dre Greenlaw and just this defense in general. And then also adding Jahdae Barron. I really love that addition. I can't say it enough. And finally, I think this Broncos defense might be a top 3 defense again. Very realistically could. If not, the borderline number 1 defense in the NFL. I think this team has very little weaknesses on defense, and I think this is going to be a really fun defense to watch. Now, I could be completely wrong. I hope not. But I do think on paper, this Denver defense looks really strong, and they also have a lot of good depth, so I really do think this has a very promising future for the Broncos because they're not just young, or they're not just really good players right now, but they're also young, so they're going to be able to continue to develop and get better. But overall, with the Broncos in whole, I think the Broncos made some very smart and bold moves in free agency and the draft, and I think a lot of people will sleep on them, and they are already sleeping on them going into next season. I think a lot of people are underestimating what this Broncos team can do. They did it last year, and I bet you, and they're already doing it again this year. So I think the Broncos can prove them wrong again, and I think they will. I think, personally, this is a hot take, or a bold take, I guess. If Bo Nix can build off of his rookie season and continue to improve, which I think he will, I think this team very well could win 10 to 12 games. Call me crazy. I think it's more of the 10-11 game range, but I do think they could win 10 to 12 games if Bo Nix continues to improve. When you have an offense with Bo Nix, with new weapons, improved weapons, and just continuous chemistry with his weapons he already has with Sutton, I think this offense can be a lot better, and I think this Broncos defense is going to continue to be good. That means you have both sides of the football really good, and that would be amazing, and I think that's a 10 to 12 win team. But if Bo Nix has that sophomore slump, things could be a lot different, and things could change. But the Broncos overall in the regular season last year especially were in a lot of single-digit games that they might have been able to win, and they already won 10 games last season, so I'm very curious to see how the Broncos do this year. But anyways, drop your predictions down below of what record you think the Broncos will do, and maybe your stat predictions for Bo Nix. But anyways, that's going to be the end of podcast number 54. I appreciate all of you for tuning into this episode. once again, make sure to tune into next episode where we will be kind of discussing the draft lottery results. And also we're going to be doing a mock draft 2.0 to basically, follow up after that. But in the meantime, I hope you all have an amazing week. Check me out on all social media platforms. You can check that out in the link or down below in the description. But anyways, have an amazing week. God bless.